Hey guys, give me just a second. Hey there. Give me 2 shakes to get everything set up. Hope you guys are doing all right tonight. Trying to get some spooky Oh, and they left. Oh well. Hey, what's up, Vincent? Gonna get some spooky ambient music for you guys. How's it going? You guys doing all right tonight? Let's try this one. Always good to see you guys. Oh, there's Crystalline. Hey, Crystalline. There we go. Adjust that a little bit. So, I enjoyed the last live stream so much, I figured I'd come back and maybe do another one. I thought I might read from. Jesus, the stack's getting pretty big. I know they're all different sizes. I don't know why Amazon does that, no matter what I tell them to do. But I've got 5 different books. If you guys have got a particular story that you'd like to hear, even if it's not in the book, I can probably look it up from somewhere. I figured I'd hang out for a little bit. Heard you also. I wish I had punch and pie. I have tea. It's green. My favorite. Normally I drink coffee, but it's a little late for coffee. But then again, I don't want my voice to get all scraggly, which it will if I got to read for you guys. Nothing in particular. Oh, let's see. I'm sure I can find something to read. How did you guys like the latest Dragview story? I know a lot of you guys had questions about the old prison there, so I thought maybe that might help shed a little light onto the mysterious warden, you know. Make sure. Oh. Well, let's see. I guess I can just start reading something. I mean, nobody's here yet, so let's see. This is a good one. This was actually the first one that I ever published. Well, published. I put it on Reddit. I mean, I don't know how. I don't know if Reddit counts or not, but you know, this is the first one I ever actually put up on Reddit. I'm sure you guys have heard it a bunch. That's We Have to Stop This, the one about the writer who has to stop writing creepypastas. I guess we'll start with that one and just work our way around. Like I said, if you guys have got anything in particular, let me know, and I'll be glad to read it for you. Anywho, settle in, everybody. Get your own tea. Get comfy if you're getting ready for bed. I know I'm going to be getting ready for bed here in a little bit, so I'll read you guys a bedtime story. We have to stop this. All of this. We have to stop writing, reading, telling, spreading these things around. As I sit here in my 1-bedroom apartment, I can feel him looking at me. He's closer now. I can see him pacing around the corner, and when he sees what I'm writing here, I'm not sure what will happen. I've been writing these things for years. I've polluted the world with this filth for a year, and now I'm done. These stories, these abominations, ruined my life like no drug or drink ever could. But after tonight, I guess I'll never have to think of them again. I don't want you to think that it's always been this way. I haven't always been a worthless waste of space. Oh, hopefully before too long, you guys will learn some things about the warden that'll make more sense. But not just yet. I won't spoil it all for you. I was married once, married to an amazing woman who loved me. We had a little boy and a new house. I had a job that I loved. We had friends. We went out. We had a life together. That was before I found the creepypastas. I've always been a fan of horror. Horror films, horror comics, horror stories, pretty much anything scary. I remember when I was 6, I watched The Shining with my mom, and while I didn't sleep at all that night, I remember relishing the squirming feeling that lived in my guts. From that day forward, I was hooked. I watched anything and everything, even cheesy films like Paranormal Activity and The Haunting of Sunshine Girl. They seemed to pique my adrenaline. The darker the movie, the more it appealed to me. But I guess that's why I liked them so much. If I was afraid, then my adrenaline was pumping, and it made me feel more alert, more alive. Horror movies are how I met my wife, Lisa. Oh, your hunches should definitely tell you not to trust him. He's a bad, bad man. Being somebody. Did I miss that one? You guys are absolutely somebodies. I must have missed that one. Uh, Shoot, you and Vincent have been here for a long time. I wouldn't be here without you guys. We were both standing in line at the midnight showing of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and began talking about horror movies as we waited to get our tickets. By the time we got inside, her friends had called to cancel, and I invited her to sit with me. She was so cute, but turned out to be a total scaredy cat. She spent most of the movie hiding her eyes and squeezing my hand during the best parts. I didn't mind, though. I think I was in love with her by the end of that movie. 6 months later, we moved in together. To my surprise, we meshed well together. We didn't have the usual arguments over what was for dinner or the division of chores around the house, and the house was brighter with her in it. On the 1 year anniversary of our first movie, I proposed and we made it official. Oh, yeah. I tend to I tend to say things like that. My bad, guys. Our one bedroom condo, was fine for a while, but when she told me that she was pregnant, I knew it was time to find a bigger place. I do IT work for a pretty big company, so money for a house wasn't too big of an issue. With our modest incomes, we were able to get a nice 3 bedroom house in the city, and I put my condo up for rent. When our son was born, I thought it was the happiest day of my life. For a while, we were the picture of a happy family. Little did I know how quickly that would end. These are so weird to reread because it makes me want to go through and edit the whole thing again. No, you guys keep chattering. I don't mind. I like the involvement. After 2.5 years together, just as my son turned 2, a friend of mine told me about a new game on Steam called Five Nights at Freddy's. He knew I liked horror games and bought me a copy saying it was a late birthday present. I gave it a thorough playthrough and thought it was kind of cheesy. I felt it still was an okay experience, though. The game opened a door I wish had stayed closed, though. I was taken by the mysteries of the game, the bite of 85, the animatronics, the missing children, and it led me to search online for more info. That's when I stumbled across the creepypastas. They were great. I had never seen them before. They were terrifying in a way that I hadn't been terrified in years. I started with a classic, 1999, which was recommended because of the main character from the FNAF games. Do any of you guys remember 1999? That was probably one of my favorite creepypastas, like back in the day. I don't know if any of you read it. It's about the kid that watches the TV show with the bear the costume bear on it. That was that was probably one of the ones that really started me off on this kind of thing. Oh, you should. It's so good. It's like right up there with Candle Cove, which is my all-time favorite. I'll stop. I'll keep reading now. Sorry. From the first time I read the story, I felt like there was something about it, something different. It prickled the hairs on the back of my neck to be sure, but I also felt like something was watching me. I shrugged it off just as that scared feeling. Like when you watch a really intense horror movie and for a few days you're on edge and you get that awkward feeling. I spent the next few months engrossed in any creepypasta I could find. Jeff the Killer, the Slender Man Legend, Smile Dog, Candle Cove. That one was one of my favorites. The Blue Man, all the SCPs. I'm ashamed to say that after a while they became sort of a mania in me, and I absorbed anything that I could lay my hands on. Ooh, someone else has got TIC. Yeah, I tend to read back through these, and then inevitably there's another edition on Amazon because I've went through and changed everything. Well, you got in at the tail end, Crystalline. I had been reading towards the middle of their life expectancy, and I don't know. There's some people say that creepypastas are on the way out now. I don't know. I think they're really starting to pick up again, but I could be wrong. I don't know about the chair. Really liked how the warden showed. Oh, the recent one, Swift Fox, about the electric chair. That was a good one. Yeah, I might read that one if you guys want me to. I'll have to look that one up on my Google Doc. Let's see, where were we? When I learned that there were several channels on YouTube that read them aloud, I instantly subscribed. I would eat through months or years of archives in one sitting, and with my headphones on, I felt immersed in a world of darkness that no horror movie could simulate. The creepypastas created a movie in my head that no Nightmare on Elm Street or House of a Thousand Corpses could rival, and it seemed like when I had time, I was always listening to them, ignoring everything else. That's when things started to get really bad. Is that last night's? No. Oh. Or do you mean? Yeah, the one about the chair from the prison. That's a good time to. It's a good time to get caught up, Vincent. I can assure you. I've been there myself. When I was in the hospital last, I remember eating through a lot of creepy pastas. I I've gotten a little more active as of late because I need some of them for my Tuesday Thursday bits, but I definitely read a ton of them before I started writing them. It started with insomnia. I was plagued with nightmares that would wake me up several times a night. I'd wake up certain that there was something in the bedroom with me, but a frantic sweep would find nothing except a grumpy wife at being woken up by yet another one of my nightmares. Got to the point where I was lucky to get 5 hours of sleep a night, then four, then two if I was really lucky, then two, but only if I took sleep aids or drank myself into oblivion. My wife made me go see a doctor who put me on medication, but that didn't seem to work either. Then, at her wits' end, she made me sleep on the couch. That only escalated my night terrors. That feeling of being watched got worse and worse, and I started seeing something out of the corner of my eye when I listened to them. As I sat awake, using the fear to keep myself from the nightmares, I would see the shadowy something as it huddled in the corner. It would creep closer and closer, just out of my sight, but always in the peripherals, until I'd snap my head around, and it would vanish. I started having trouble at work. I was always tired and short with my coworkers, and one day the boss told me not to bother coming back. My wife was furious and finally told me that it was my family or the scary stories. We argued, but my heart wasn't in it. I had come to the same understanding by then that the stories were the problem. The stories were keeping me awake. The stories were keeping me amped up. The stories were making me paranoid. I needed to work. I needed to be a father. So I did the only thing that made sense. I gave them up cold turkey, at least for a little while. I do like my soda, just not this late at night. I'm old, One day you guys will get there, I'm sure. Ancient like me, and can't have caffeine after 8 o'clock, or you can't go to sleep. A little bit. I definitely watch some Breaking Bad every now and again. Here lately, it's been God, what have I been watching lately? If it's not on YouTube, not much. I don't know. I tend to blow through all these history channels here lately. Yo, I definitely enjoy falling into my stories sometimes. I lasted all of 2 months without the stories. I started to slip back into a normal routine. I was getting to sleep on time. My job let me come back on a trial period. It quickly became a permanent gig. My attitude improved. I was once again the man I'd always been. It's funny, though, how we forget what set us down the bad path once we're back in the light. It was just a little bit at first, on my phone at work. Then, after my wife went to bed, or when I was on the toilet. Slowly, the night terrors came creeping back again. I had relapsed hard. Before I knew it, I was listening to them all the time. That's when my wife took our son and left for her mother's house. My nightmares got worse, and suddenly I wasn't sleeping at all. My temper would flare unexpectedly, and that was the last straw for my newly returned job. My friends tried to help me, but I became moody and unpredictable, and soon they stopped coming around too. I started drinking again, drinking to blackout, and I feel a few to blackout and feel a few moments of blissful oblivion. That's a weird sentence right there. My wife filed for divorce, unable to help me and unwilling to watch me kill myself with these stupid stories. My parents stopped calling, agreeing with my wife that if I couldn't stop on my own, they didn't want anything to do with me. Then one day I realized the stories were all I had left. So I thought. About a year ago, the stories weren't enough. I could see the thing in the corner of my eye more and more, stalking me. One day, for no reason at all, I started writing my own stories. I've never been a writer, far from it, but the act of writing worked as its own kind of talisman against the creature. Writing them seemed to keep him at bay, seemed to keep the darkness out of me. For a while, things got better. I was getting 5 hours of sleep again. I was feeling better than I had in a long time. But the writing became just as big a mania as the reading. I mean, I heard she died. Is there a thing surrounding it? I'd like to hear that. That sounds interesting. I, me too, Vincent. I hope that's the way I maintain. I'm 36, but I hope I maintain that. Crystal, and the trick is if you just, stop remembering how old you are, you stop aging. Everybody knows that. Can't get any older if you don't remember. The divorce proceedings went badly for me. She got the house, of course, and child support, and a lot of other things I would have fought for once. I didn't care, though. None of it mattered to me. All I cared about was the thing in the corner of the courtroom that kept growling and pacing. All I wanted was to get this over with so I could get home to my writing. I moved out, went back to the condo we used to live in, and took odd jobs online to keep the lights on. I've sold blood, sperm, written terrible things for terrible people, and all to feed this addiction that I've developed. I'm no better than a smack addict, no better than some worthless junkie who writes up his fix every day. My wife keeps calling me, asking when I plan to come see our son, who keeps asking where daddy is. But I don't have time for them. I have to write. I have to keep the beast at bay. But now even the writing stopped working. That thing isn't in the corner of my eye anymore. I can see him now. He's not even trying to hide, and I'm afraid that he's very close to having me. God for God forgive me, but he's stalking forward right now, and I can see his paws or feet or whatever as they make little divots in the carpet. I can smell his rancid breath as he grins with his lipless mouth full of teeth. So, what's the point of this? Why write a creepypasta about creepypastas? For some kind of macabre immortality within a world I once lived? To have one more hurrah before the end? No. I'm writing this for you, for the ones who may be reading this when I'm gone. Always remember, if you remember nothing else, that these tales are spun from darkness, that the thing you feel watching when you create fear is real. It can and will get you if you let it. While you stare long into the abyss, know that it stares hungrily back at you. His face is inches from my throat now, and I can finally identify the brimstone in his very breath. I think my time might be up. All right. Well, that's what were we reading? We have to stop this. It's from my first book, Internet Nightmares. If you'd like your own copy, they're all on Amazon. Let's see. I've done the same thing. I I can't say much. I've got good genes. My mom's looked 35 since she was 30, and she just continues to do so year in, year out. I meet people from high school all the time, and they're like, other than the beard, you really haven't changed that much. Kind of hoping to maintain that into my later years. But yeah, did you guys have any requests? I've got just about anything. I mean, if not, I can look it up in Google Docs. I've got everything archived. Um, don't forget, there's a book coming out at the beginning of next month too. Um, what is it called? Pretty sure it's called Bleak Vistas. Don't mind the clutter on my desktop. I'm doing like 12 things at once. Yeah, Bleak Vistas is coming out in June. So, next month. Of course, if you're part of my book club on Patreon, you'll get a copy of that as soon as I get my author's copies out. If you're not, don't worry. You can always get one on Amazon. I'm actually going to submit that manuscript probably tomorrow or Monday, so that it should be available by the 1st. It usually takes them about 2 or 3 days to check and make sure everything's okay. Well, any requests? I've got anything you want to hear. As long as you're aging gracefully, right? That's all that counts. I mean, well, let's see. I guess. Oh, we'll go on to book number 2. I guess this is Dark Vortex. Let's see what we got. Did I put a ID? How about a Stragview story? Any requests for a Stragview story? I think I've got a couple in here. Oh, hang on. I've got a good one. This one's one of my very favorites. I can find it. How many pages is this book to? That's a good question. It's over 200. I know that much. Let's see. There it is. This one's called Black Coffee, and it's probably one of the ones. Pick the one that's closest to page 83. I can do that. Oh, the sweater. Okay. I'll keep my finger in Black Coffee. There it is. The sweater. This one's actually in my holiday collection too. Fall Frights and Autumn Chills. Um, if you like the artwork, I got a German guy named Hellscythe that does it for me. He does just great work. Like I really like shouting him out to people. And all he asks is that I let him read my stories in German, and just him. So I'm good with that. He does a good job on his channel. If you like my thumbnails too, he's the one that taught me how to use Photoshop. All right, let's see. We'll read the sweater and then we'll read Black Coffee. How about that? The sweater. I didn't want the sweater in the first place. From the first time I ever laid eyes on the damn thing, I knew it would haunt me until the day I die. I first saw it in a thrift store window when I was 10 years old. It was a lumpy green thing made from thick yarn, an ugly monstrosity that looked like someone's grandmother had knitted it badly. As much as I hated it, I was drawn to it too. Even as I stared, I thought I could see a pair of two big eyes goggling at me from the pattern. Two sharp teeth floating amongst the swirls of thread seemed eager to bite as it slid on. The arms ended in little tassels, excuse me, that looked like claws, needle-sharp claws that looked like the needles on shots. I hated it, but I was drawn to it in that way that children are drawn to anything that might end their perceived immortality. My mom must have noticed my perceived interest. 2 weeks later, just as the autumn chill began to rise, she gave it to me one morning so I could wear it to school. She pulled it out from behind her back, flourishing it like the end of a magic trick. She smiled hugely, clearly thinking she had something I really wanted. My stomach dropped when I saw it, and I was again filled with a sense of dread that she must have picked up on. Let's see. That's always a good way to pick anyway, just random pages. Sometimes get you gold. It's the sweater you like so much, she said, looking a little hurt. You seem so taken with it that I went back and bought it for you. Mom didn't have the money to buy me things. Dad had left when I was a baby, and she worked as a waitress to put food on the table and a roof over my head. We didn't have a lot of money for presents, and I could tell that however much this sweater had cost was too much for me to act anything but grateful. I pulled it on, not really wanting it on my skin, but pretending it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It was made out of scratchy wool that I knew at first glance would make me feel way too warm. It rubbed at my skin like steel wool as it settled on my arms. It just felt wrong as it sat against my skin, and I immediately wanted to take it off. It felt like there were bugs in it. As I walked out the door, I couldn't help but wonder if maybe roaches or earwigs had gotten into the fabric. She walked me to the bus stop, all the while smiling at me as I pretended that the sweater wasn't the worst thing I'd ever worn. As the bus pulled away from the curb, I yanked it off and stuffed it in my backpack. My friend Mark looked at me strangely. New sweater? Mom found it for me, but it's just about the most uncomfortable sweater I've ever seen. I thought it looked kind of cool, like Slimer from the Ghostbusters, he commented. The movies were popular around that time, and I had to admit that it did look pretty ghoulish. The patterns on the front, the big teeth and the big eyes, did look like the green ghost from the movie, and we talked about it all the way to school. I forgot all about the sweater until I got home that afternoon. I found it crumpled at the bottom of my backpack when I went to get my homework. I took it out and threw it in my desk chair. As I sat to do my homework, though, it began to itch at me. I took it and tossed it in a chair by the closet door instead, getting back to work. Even having it against my skin made me feel weird, and I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder as I tried to do my homework. It felt like it was looking at me somehow, staring at me with those two big eyes, and I felt haunted by it as I sat placidly. My mom came home a few hours later and seemed happy to see the sweater. Oh, I knew you'd like it. Was it warm enough today? Yeah, it was just right, I lied. I finished my homework and went downstairs to help her with dinner. Typically, I would have sat in my room and watched TV until dinner was made. But tonight, I just wanted an excuse to be out of my room and away from the sweater. My room felt invaded every time I looked at it, and I just wanted to be where it wasn't for a few hours. I didn't think about it again until it was time for bed. I came into my room, pajama bottoms and a white undershirt on, with my mouth still feeling minty fresh from toothpaste. I was ready to climb into bed when I saw the sweater again. For some reason, I just couldn't stand looking at it anymore. I picked it up, the coarse fabric scritching at my hand, and tossed it under the bed. I knew it meant nothing, a meaningless gesture, but I didn't want it to watch me while I slept. Mom came in and kissed my forehead. "Good night, honey," she said, and turned off the light as she closed the door. I burrowed down under the covers and started getting comfortably sleepy. It had been a long day with another one to follow, and as I began to edge towards sleep, I heard a weird noise from somewhere in the room. It sounded like someone dragging wire across the floor, and as I focused my attention on it, I could hear the sound sliding across the boards. I sat up in bed and looked for it, that harsh slithering that wound its way over the short carpet. As I cast my eyes on the chair by the closet, I saw the source of the noise. It was the sweater. Hope you guys are enjoying the story. Let's see. Oh, yeah. I can't wear wool real well. It's way too itchy. Oh, I realized too today, thanks to YouTube, it's the second anniversary of my channel. So I figured it seemed advantageous to do a live on my channel's second birthday. Yay! Anyway, let's get back to it, I reckon. It was sitting in the chair where I'd snatched it, leering at me with its toothy grin. It couldn't be there. I'd thrown it under the bed, but there it sat, as though I had never grabbed it. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe I hadn't thrown it. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing, and now I was scaring myself. I rolled over and tried to get back to sleep. As I tossed and turned, though, I could feel those bug eyes looking at me. Pulled the covers over my head and tried to block it out. As I lay there, I imagined that I could hear that wire dragging across the wood again. It was like the scratching of claws times 10, and I could hear it going under my bed and towards the wall. I peeked out from under my covers and looked towards the chair, making sure that the hideous sweater was still there and not responsible for the noise. The chair was empty. Oh, the garden stories. That's a long one. We could read some of those though, certainly. That's I keep meaning to write more of the Kashmir Botanical Garden stories. I think I'm going to add it to my Friday list. Not to spoil it, but I've got a new one for you guys. This one, well, I already announced it for this Monday. The Black Site stories, but I got another new series for our Monday stories that I think you guys are really going to like. I've been playing around with it a little bit, and I think I'm finally ready to debut it. I think you guys will like it. I really do. I sat straight up and peered around in the semi-dark, searching for the sweater. It couldn't have moved. It was a sweater, a stupid sweater, and even my 10-year-old brain knew that sweaters didn't just get up and move around on their own. I looked over the edge of the bed, seeing nothing, and hesitantly, I hung upside down and looked so I could glance under the bed. In my 10-year-old brain, that was where the monsters lived, and this sweater had become a monster. I peeked, afraid to see it, but it wasn't there. Only a few toys and dirty clothes greeted me. I looked back at the chair, still finding it empty, and snuggled down under the covers so I could get some sleep. I awoke in the morning to a terrible pain on my arm. The sweater was in bed with me. It was curled up around my arm as though it had gotten tangled in the night, and I wrenched it off violently. I didn't want it to touch me. I didn't want it in contact with my skin. As it came free, I saw the source of my pain. On my forearm, on the inside of the arm, was what looked like a bite. I inspected it in the dewy morning light and felt sure that I could pick out individual teeth marks in the flesh of my arm. I looked fearfully at the crumpled green garment in the corner and suddenly felt sure that it was the source of the bite. I ran downstairs to show my mom, who was starting to set out breakfast things. Sounds like me with Spanish. She looked at the bite and declared it a rash. Probably from your new sweater, she said, and I could hear real sadness in her voice. She still believed that I really liked that ghastly thing, and the thought that it had caused me pain made her sad. She said she would wash it today after school and have it back to me tomorrow, and I remember hoping that it shrank in the wash. I thought all day about the terrible garment coming back too small or shredded by some fluke, and the idea brought me some little joy throughout the day. When I got home, however, I heard the washing machine in full swing and found a note on the table that Mom had gone grocery shopping. I figured she'd put the sweater in with the load and went upstairs to get my homework started. Mark and Davy wanted to ride bikes later, and I knew that if I got my math done before dinner, I'd be able to go riding with them before the sun went down. When I opened the door, I was startled by the green sweater sitting on the chair where it had been last night. Hope you guys are enjoying the story. We're getting there. This is a good one. I really I like the green sweater. It was I call them Stephen King stories because it's like I wrote them in like an hour or two because I needed a story that day or something. Some of these are from a thing I did a couple of years ago where I wrote 30 stories in 30 days to see if I could. I think the sweater is one of those. Like I wrote it on deadline so I could get it out. I God, I wish I had that kind of drive anymore. I know it was only 2 years ago, but man, like the idea of doing 30 stories in 30 days just sounds terrible. Let's see. I was angry at myself a moment later. Why was I so afraid of this stupid sweater? I grabbed it up, the yarn digging in my hand like steel wool, and took it to the laundry room. I opened the washer and threw it inside, slamming the lid closed and stomping back upstairs to start my homework. I finished quickly, and when Mom got home, I went outside to play. I spent the afternoon riding bikes and jumping dirt ramps with my friends, and as the streetlights came on, I turned for home. When it came time for bed, I walked back up to my room to find the sweater back on the chair where it had been earlier. There was a stack of freshly folded clothes on my dresser, my socks put away in the top drawer, but for some reason Mom had put out the sweater on the chair. I walked around the sweater as I got ready for bed, but I kept thinking I could see it move out of the corner of my eye. It didn't leave the chair, but I thought I saw the arm wiggle or the waistline shiver slightly as I walked around the room. I went straight to bed after lights out, and in the morning, I found more bite marks on my arm. These stories. It's I don't know. Sometimes it's a little rough. I'm really blessed that I found a job and a position at that job where I can, get some writing done in the wee hours. Job always comes first because I work security, but in the wee hours after all my charges go to bed, I've got plenty of time to get some writing in and work on my books and things. And I just, I'm aware of the good luck that I've had there, and it means a lot. Let's see. For the next few weeks, I tried various measures to keep the sweater away from me. I left it in other rooms, sometimes locked in other rooms, but it always found its way back to my room. Excuse me. The closet was no obstacle for it, and twice I awoke to see it sitting in the chair as the door slowly closed behind it. One night I stuffed it in the washing machine and closed the door locking behind it, but I still woke up the next morning to find it in my bed. My sleep started to suffer, and I found it hard to get a full night's sleep as I woke to search for the sweater. My teacher told my mom that my performance was suffering, and I was given DRs several times for sleeping in class. If they'd seen what was under the sleeves of my long sleeve shirt, they would have probably had some questions for my mother too. The bites were numerous, red and oozing blood sometimes, but I kept them closely guarded from both my teachers and my mother. My relationship with my mother became strained. She knew I wasn't sleeping well, but she wouldn't even entertain the idea that it was due to some evil sweater. She thought I was looking for attention, that I was just a typical child with an overactive imagination. But she couldn't take off work just to sit at home with me and protect me from a piece of clothing. At one point, she even threw the sweater in the garbage, thinking it would solve everything. But when it reappeared in my bedroom, she accused me of keeping it around just to get attention. After 2 weeks of being terrorized, I decided to finally put a stop to it. That night, I stayed awake and watched it. The next day was Saturday, and I knew Mom wouldn't care if I slept in. I was going to catch it in the act and show Mom that it was hurting me. Maybe then she would let me get rid of it. I had a big metal flashlight with a thick blanket that I was going to catch it in. I could hold on to it until it ran out of steam and then show it to Mom, she wouldn't she wouldn't think I'd been dreaming. I watched the red numbers on my Ninja Turtles alarm clock tick slowly by, and by 11:30 I was having trouble staying awake. The sweater hadn't done anything but sit there all night, and as my eyes got heavier and heavier, I found myself slipping towards sleep. I lost the fight before midnight and woke up with my head against the blankets. Sorry, voice is getting a little dry. Oh yeah, languages are tricky, man. I anybody that can master more than two of them is pretty impressive to me. Heck, I'm not even sure sometimes I've mastered English. Let's see. I looked at the clock. The numbers read 2:45 a.m., and I swept the light towards the chair as I tried to orient myself. The beam fell on the empty chair, and I could feel my dread mounting. Where had it gone? Had it slipped off the chair while I was asleep? As I searched for it in the beam of light, though, I heard the familiar sound of wires scraping against wood behind me. I turned the beam of light onto the headboard, and there was the sweater. I thought for a moment that I might be dreaming, but as the flashlight illuminated it, I had to come to grips with the idea that what I was seeing was real. The bug-eyed pattern had become a real set of bulbous eyes, the green body a bulbous mass of fibers and filaments, and the teeth had become large and snapping. It was perched on my headboard, clearly startled by the sudden intrusion of light. It emitted a loud, otherworldly scream as it leapt at my face, and I swung the flashlight without thinking. It smacked into it with a soft woof sound, and I watched it fall to the floor next to the closet and go still. The beam fell on it, and it scrambled across the floor as it frantically crawled for the bed. Oh, definitely, definitely. I sat on the bed and listened to it rustling beneath the box springs. I'd glimpsed its true form now. I had seen the wicked teeth that had left their marks on my arm, and I was not about to let it sink them into me again. I jumped out of bed, flipping on the light, and scooped up the sweater as I headed for the hall. The hall closet was stuffed with old tubs for storage. As I wrenched open the closet, I found what I was looking for on the second shelf. Mom had an old popcorn tin, the kind you give people for Christmas when you've got no idea what to give them. As I reached for it, I felt the sweater screech and scramble towards me. It knew what I wanted to do, and it knew that it would be stuck in there if I did. I grabbed it before it could latch onto me and stuffed it down into the metal guts of the tin. I was going to strap it in there for good, and there wasn't a thing it could do about it. In the light, it was just an ordinary sweater. I made use of this knowledge and stuffed it into the tin. I heard it thrashing around in the tin and held the lid closed as I looked for the duct tape that I knew was in the closet. A few layers of tape over the lid, and I felt confident that it wouldn't be able to escape. I stacked a few boxes on top of it for good measure and left it thrashing at the bottom of the closet. As I went to sleep, I could hear its feeble anger being expelled a little at a time. The noise was like a lullaby for my tired soul. Oh, sorry to hear that, Crystalline. Dang. Dang right. Even if you don't, even if you're the only one that speaks it, your language is totally valid. Oof. I'd like to say that was the end of the ordeal, but the story is actually my reason for writing it all. It's been 25 years since that night, and I'd all but forgotten about the ordeal. I had put it off as an overactive imagination of a child, just like my mom, until I came home from work. After college, I moved several states away to a job as an architect for a big firm in Chicago. That's where I met Emily, and now we have a child of our own, my daughter, Carrie. My mother loves her granddaughter and comes to see her whenever she can, but most of the time, my mother's presence is felt through her care packages: cookies, toys, anything that makes my daughter smile. And when I got home today, I found one of those packages open on the kitchen table. The box was empty, but there was a note inside addressed to Carrie. Hi, Carrie. Grandma was cleaning out the attic and found something she thought you might like. It was your dad's when he was your age, and he used to make up the strangest stories about it. It looked so lonely when I found it, and I thought you might get more use out of it in the Windy City than I would. Love, Grandma. My blood ran cold. Sorry, my dad had called in. Where was I? I walked out of the kitchen and into the living room, catching sight of my daughter as she lay on the living room floor. She was coloring something in her binder, using her crayons to fill in whatever picture she had drawn. At that moment, my only focus was the familiar green sweater she was wearing. The yarn was a little faded, but the bug eyes still stared at me. The teeth again smiled with delirious mirth. As I stared, it seemed to say, "Hello, old friend. You thought you'd gotten rid of me, but here I am. Time for our games to start again." Carrie turned around and smiled at me, springing up and wrapping her arms around me as she wrapped me in a hug. I had to stop myself from shuddering as the sweater touched me, and she stepped back a little so I could see it when she was done. She did a little twirl so I could see the whole thing, and didn't seem to repulse her the way it had repulsed me. "Isn't it great, Daddy? Grandma sent me this cool new sweater. I love it. It's so soft and warm." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded dumbly and walked back into the kitchen to fix myself a drink. After the second drink, I began to calm down a little, started writing this so that my hands would stop shaking. Now I don't have a clue what to do. How do you tell your daughter that she's wearing something that tormented you for 2 weeks? How do you convey to her that something she loves is evil? What do I do when the bites start appearing? How do I rid myself of this evil sweater? Alrighty. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the sweater. Find this story I had a minute ago. There. Again, this is out of my second book, Dark Vortex. Oh, how's everybody feeling? Doing pretty good. Ooh, mm, dang, that's rough. Shoot, I had to scroll back up a little bit. Absolutely, I believe that too. Most people know their bodies. Um, I don't know. Sometimes it takes hearing things to go get stuff done, though. I had a tooth a couple of years ago that I wasn't going to do anything about, and then a cousin of mine actually like died from blood poisoning very suddenly. Oh, I didn't doubt. He died from blood poisoning very suddenly. Like his wife went upstairs to get dressed and came back down and he was dead because he had a bad tooth. And I immediately went and got it fixed because I was like, that's a wake up call right there. Yeah, it's condolences indeed. Absolutely. It's never an easy thing there. Oh yeah, yeah. It was a weird one. Like he was downstairs. She left him at the table to go get dressed, and he was dead just that quick. But I went and got my tooth fixed that same week. It was like, nah. Somebody put that story online for me to hear, and I need to go get it done because it had been festering back there for a while. Anyway, on that note, here's black coffee. Um, I don't know what I'm going to do. They won't stop pounding on the door. They won't stop calling my name. And before long, someone with keys will come along and unlock my office. I don't know what to do. I'm completely out of my element here. And all my brain can come back to is the coffee. Coffee. The goddamn coffee. First cup of the morning, he asked me, and all I could do was smile at him. He must be new, I thought, because if he'd been here longer than a week, he'd have known how often I show up to this machine. I stood before the coffee pot like a worshiper at the altar, and as the savory black liquid spilled into the pot, I felt my mouth water at the thought of coffee. First cup? Yeah, right. I started my day with the taste of warm, freshly brewed coffee. As I'd cooked my breakfast, I'd had another, savoring this one as I never did the first cup. And as I sat down to catch up with my emails, I drank a third as I ate my breakfast. I'd had another on I haven't I'd have another on the way to work, savoring the aroma as I sat in traffic. And now it was time to get a cup before I sat down to another day of work. Oh yeah, love me some coffee. I'm 36, working on a 33-year caffeine addiction. Love me some coffee. First cup, try fifth. This story may be semi-biographical. I've been like that since my late teens. My mother was a career nurse who drank coffee by the pot, not the cup. As a single mom trying to keep up with an active son, there was never a time I can remember when coffee wasn't a part of our lives. When I was a tyke, my mom was always running late due to my inability to get moving in the morning. No one wants to lose their job because of a kid who can't get ready. So one morning, she gave me a sippy cup of coffee, sweetened with milk and sugar. No surprise, I took to it like a fish to water. The other parents looked at her funny when she told them. She heard the usual sermons about how coffee would get me hyper or stunt my growth, but she always felt she knew better. The fact that I was never prone to hyperactivity and grew to top out around 6 feet tall seemed to have proven their worries were groundless. Coffee is life for me. It runs in my veins, and I always joke that when I die, I'll donate my body to Starbucks so I can be their flavor of the month. There you go. Coffee. Coffee's the way to go. You'll better safe than sorry. Absolutely. That cup looks a little rough, don't you think? I turned to see Chuck wandering into the break room, un- unrecognizable health smoothie in his My Body is a Temple shaker cup. The new guy greeted him as he came in, and I extended my hand for a fist bump. As as he met his knuckles to mine, I couldn't help but shudder a little at how scaly and clammy his skin always was. You'd think with all that rabbit food he ate and all those healthy shakes he drank, he could put something in his diet to fix that skin condition. It's got character, Chuck, unlike whatever you're drinking there. Chuck laughed. Is character what you call the mushrooms growing at the bottom of that thing? He was right, not about the mushrooms, but about the state of my cup. I'd had this cup for 3 years, and in that time I had never once bothered to wash it. The inside, however, let's see, no. The outside was a little stained, but otherwise looked normal. The inside, however, was a black cauldron of old coffee stains. It didn't look that bad to me, but of course, I'd gotten used to it by now. I always justified it by telling myself that I was putting boiling water into it. So anything living in there was likely boiled out of existence by the time I got around to drinking the coffee. I had no idea what I was setting myself up for, though. The hot liquid splashed into the cup with a luxurious sound, and I swirled the contents around before taking a test sip and gasping in pain. It was much too hot, but I had known that already. I talked with Chuck for a few more minutes, and when Mr. Ryan strode into the break room, we all said our goodbyes and left for our desks. Mr. Ryan was a fantastic boss, but he had a very narrow opinion on dawdling and socializing on company time. I said hi to a few of the people on my hall and stopped at Rob's door to pass a few minutes. He was hard at it already, and I could see his tongue slide across his teeth beneath his lips, a nervous habit that he said he'd had since elementary school. Oh, hi, Suzanne. Glad you could join us. We're just reading some stories. If you're heading to bed, feel free to settle in and let me read you a bedtime story. Where was I? His dark hair looked sweaty, and when I asked him if he was okay, he said he had to make an 8 a.m. deadline, but maybe we could catch up at lunch. I said that sounded great, and as I walked into my office, I saw that Lisa was already behind her computer. Lisa was a mousy new girl that had moved into the office across from mine a few months ago. She was about my age, with straight brown hair and that she always piled neatly on her head, and a pair of cute little black glasses that she constantly pushed back onto the bridge of her nose. She didn't say much, we waved at each other most every morning, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a little crush on her. That we are. She waved back, smiling in her shy way, and went back to work as I stepped into my office and closed the door. I set the coffee on my desk and turned on my computer as I prepared to start another day. I'm an IT specialist, so most of my day is fixing other people's problems. There was an email already from Janice about how her monitor wouldn't come on, and another from Stephen about his issues with the network. I sipped my coffee as I read these, testing the hot liquid with my lips before committing to the sip. I reached for the phone so I could call Janice. Janice was a frequent caller. The IT guy before me had thought it would be funny to give her the most ancient of our relic computers. I'd been keeping the dinosaur running for years now, and every time the budget committee told me that they just couldn't find the money for a new computer, I died a little inside. I called Stephen, and after a few questions, it became apparent that his problem was of his own making. He'd opened another questionable email, and now his computer wouldn't link to the network. This was by design. Stephen was notorious for opening anything he found in his inbox. He'd brought the network down several times with this sort of behavior. I logged in remotely and reverted to a previous state, and it solved the problem. The virus hadn't been that aggressive, and he thanked me for helping him. I reached for my cup and found it was empty. I'd been sipping the coffee while I was on the phone with Stephen, and I drank more than I expected. I called Janice and asked her what was going on with her computer, and after a few sentences, I reached into the drawer and found a new power cord. Her computer seemed to burn through them for some reason, and I'd recently made a note to keep them in stock. I locked my computer, grabbed my cup, and figured I'd stop for a fresh cup on the way to Janice's office. I stepped out into the hallway, turned left, and stopped dead in my tracks. Oh, excuse me. Hope you guys are enjoying the story. Again, it's out of Dark Vortex. If you'd like to get your own copy, it's on Amazon. I'm not quite shameless enough to leave links, but I think they're at the end of all my videos. My cup shattered to the carpeted floor and drew the creature's attention at the end of the hall. It was hideous. It had a bulbous gray head that was covered in coarse black hair and small white eyes. Its jaws lolled open and revealed a mouth full of sewing needle teeth and a flicking red tongue that constantly moved over them. It was dressed in a white button-up shirt and a pair of black slacks, but the shirt bulged with coarse black hair, and the pants looked to be barely containing its odd-shaped legs. He looked at me for a moment, eyes blinking in odd succession, before raising a hand and asking if I was okay. I shuddered and felt my knees trying to unhinge as I slid to the wall. It sounded like Rob. Rob's voice was coming out of this creature's mouth, and as it did, I could feel my mind slipping a little. What the hell was going on? Had I been drugged? Were they playing a trick on me? As the Rob creature made its way up the hall, I saw another thing stick its head out of the bathroom. It looked like an enormous bat head stuck into a business suit, and in one clawed, scaly hand, it held something that looked like Chuck's smoothie shaker. He didn't even look real. The creature looked like a photorealistic movie monster or the image from a horror site where someone's drawn the creatures just a little too well. As the Rob creature got closer, I could see small sores on his skin, long curly hairs protruding in the places between his eyes, and I felt a scream rip up my throat. Ooh, it's getting a little dry. The Chuck creature blinked his two big eyes at me. What's wrong? Are you okay? It came blundering out of the break room and towards me, and I felt my legs finally take orders as I backpedaled towards the exit door. It was 30 feet away down several hallways, but I felt motivated enough to run a mile in a minute flat. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong, and until I knew what was going on, I wasn't sure I could trust any of my senses. I'd come up to my office door when my back met resistance, and I realized I'd bumped into someone. I turned my head woodenly to see what new horror I had blundered into, and I felt a fresh scream rip through me. It was a spider, a giant spider with a body on top of its abdomen like some fantasy creature from a video game. Its torso was vaguely feminine, breasts poking from underneath a blue cardigan that hung from its shoulders. Its 8 chitinous legs clicked on the floor, and it took a step backwards to assess me. It looked at me with familiarity, and I could see that it had shiny black hair piled on its head above its 8 rotating eyes. Oh, what's up, Sleepy Gray? We're reading Black Coffee. Let's see. 2 eyes seemed to be covered by thin metal glasses, and I blundered towards my door as I realized who it was. The spider thing was Lisa. Sorry, are you okay? I didn't mean to. I didn't let her finish. I pushed my way into my office and slammed the door behind me. I locked the handle, pushed my chair under it, and cringed away to the farthest wall I could get to. What in the hell was going on? Had that been real? Why was I seeing? What was I seeing out there? That couldn't be my colleagues, could it? They sounded like them, even sort of looked like them, but the creatures out there had been so nightmarish that I couldn't even process them. All I could do was huddle under my desk, knees pulled to my chest, and try not to cry as someone knocked on the door. You okay in there? It was Chuck. Scared Lisa half to death, man. Think she's crying in her office. Maybe you should go apologize. I stiffened. Lisa was crying. Had I done that? I couldn't bear the thought that I'd made Lisa cry. I had half risen from under the desk to get myself under control. This wasn't real. The monsters were trying to trick me so they could get me out of the office. I sat back down under my desk and squeezed my knees to my chest again. They couldn't trick me like that. I wasn't going to be fooled so easily. Chuck banged on the door. Same and same. Chuck banged on the door harder this time and asked what my problem was. Rob's voice made an appearance as well, and he apologized for startling me. They were worried about me and wanted me to come out so that they could sort this through. They were scared for me and wanted to see me. They got angry at how I was acting and started banging louder, and all the while, I just huddled under my desk and sobbed quietly. I couldn't process what was going on or why this was happening, and all avenues seemed to come back to the coffee. Someone had drugged me. Coffee. Story about the guy being nosy about the coffee. Is that one of mine? I don't remember that one. I write so many. Um, I'm gonna have to think about that one. It sounds familiar. Someone was messing with me. Someone had done this to make me freak out. But why? That was when the phone rang. It jangled merrily in the cradle, unaware of the horror show just outside the office. I looked up over the edge of my desk like a cartoon character. I almost expected it to grow fangs or sprout eyes, but it didn't. Just continued to be an average black plastic phone. I reached out shakily for it, and as my sweaty hands settled around it, I felt its solidity and had second thoughts about my perception. My desk was still here, my computer still hummed peacefully. If this was a world for monsters, then how could all these things exist? How would a monster type with his big clawed hands? How would he sit in a normal chair? How would he pick up a phone? I picked up the phone and heard Mr. Ryan's calm voice wash over me. Um, I don't think that's one of mine. Sounds pretty cool though. If you find it, send me a link. I'd love to read it. Let's see. It took a minute for me to realize that he was calling my name, and I was just sitting there in the calm warmth of my realization. Hello, sir? I said, and my voice only shook a little. Are you okay? His voice was calm and rich and made me feel like control had been restored. I don't know, sir. I'm seeing some weird stuff. Have you imbibed any substances today? It's okay if you have. I just want to know how we can help you. I had a cup of coffee in the break room and coffee at home. It was fine when I got here, sir. I don't know what's going on. I'll be there in a few minutes. Wait there. And he hung up before I could tell him about the monsters. I hung up the phone and sat huddled under my desk. He wouldn't be able to get here, not with the monsters there, and even if he could, would he be normal? Maybe this was another trick by the monsters. I sat under my desk, shuddering and waiting for the creatures to break down my door and get me. They'd stopped banging and shouting, but I could still hear them scuttling around out there. They were waiting for me to drop my guard. Then they could get me. 4 loud knocks made me jump and hit my head on the desk. It's Mr. Ryan. Come to the door and let's talk about this. I slunk from under my desk, looking all around like a scared rabbit as I approached the door and thought it might explode. Are the monsters gone? He didn't answer right away, probably hoping he had misheard me. Monsters? I put my mouth close to the door and whispered, the monsters that are out in the hall. No monsters. Why don't you let me in so we can talk about all this and get everything straightened out? Your friends and coworkers are worried about you and are anxious to get this sorted out. Like I said, if you find a link, shoot it my way. I'd love to read it on the channel. My hands shook as I sent them struggling towards the doorknob. I must have been wrong. Maybe I'd just had a psychotic incident or something. And now everything was back to normal. I'd acted like an ass and scared the hell out of everyone. It's time to go face the music, maybe find out what all this was about. And as I wrapped my hand around the knob, I was sure that everything would be back to normal when I opened the door. As the door came open, the worst horror of all was before it. He was a demon, his skin the color of burnt pork and awash with cracks and blisters that opened and oozed as he stood before me. His hands were cruel claws sprouting from the cuffs of his Armani suit, and his wings extended like a miasma behind him. His face was wide and lolling, eyeless and earless, with a massive set of ram's horns that curled above the door jamb that he hulked in. When he opened his mouth, I heard the voice of Satan himself, the lilting voice that invited Eve to eat the apple, and I knew that I would never be able to deny him if he spoke. Now then, Let's see what all the. I slammed the door in his face, and they've been banging for nearly 30 minutes. So here I sit, writing my experiences in hopes that someone will take something from it before they burst through the door and get me. As I write, though, a sobering feeling has occurred to me. There's a mirror in my desk, and as I write this, I can't help but look at the drawer and fight the urge to pull it out. As I sit here panicked, afraid that I've somehow found myself in a world of monsters, I never stop to think that maybe the problem is me. Maybe I've lived inside a delusion my whole life. Something in that moldy coffee cup triggered me to see the world for what it really is. Could it be possible that if I were to take that mirror out and look at myself, I would see my own scales and fangs and slime as well? Could it be that somehow the veil's been pulled away and I'm finally seeing the world for what it is? Hey, Jojo. Well, that was Dark Black Coffee from Dark Vortex. Again, if you'd like your own copy, they're all on Amazon. I've got links in basically all my videos. I'm just not sure how to do it on here because I'm kind of new to streaming. Oh, I hope you guys are enjoying the stream. Let's see. Ah! Hang on, that's some technical difficulties. Oh, my spooky ambience. No. All right, that's better. Sorry about that. All righty. Give me just a second. I spilled tea all over my desk. Oh, not my intention, but it tried to dunk itself in my coffee or my tea, as it were. All right. Okay, so I had somebody suggest the what was it earlier? The Botanical Garden story. Let me just find that one real quick. It's here somewhere. Let's see. Dang it, where'd it go? I think it's in next. I think that's the ending of next year's compilation. I usually try to do a big one at the end of the compilations. Alrighty. Any nice cat stories? No. I'm sorry. They used to do a thing. I used to have a fan back when I just wrote on Reddit, like before I really started doing videos, who had a running timer of all the cats I had killed in my stories, and I think I was up to like 7. Apparently, I just don't write nice cat stories. Or I don't write stories where cats don't die or are evil. I don't know. I love cats. Like, I own 3 of them. But they never seem to make it out alive. I don't know why. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Kashmir Botanical Gardens. I'll read the first one, I think. Let me make that a little bigger because my eyesight is terrible. Yeah, I'll have to look. I really wish I could find that. Like he had a whole running tally. Like it was funny. I Every time I'd accidentally kill a cat in one of my stories, he's like, "Up, you're up to 6 now," and it's like, "My bad. I didn't know we were keeping score." Alrighty, let's see. Kashmir Botanical Gardens, Part 1, The Pale Lady. The Kashmir Botanical Gardens are a pretty interesting place. The gardens, despite being in the mountainous region of Georgia, have a nearly constant temperature between 70 and 85 degrees. A little bit. Sorry about that. It never snows in Kashmir Botanical Gardens, and it's utterly immune to the cold snaps and freeze warnings that sometimes affect the area. The plants here require only minimal care, seeming to get exactly what they need to flourish from the soil and regular waterings. The place should not exist, especially not in a town as provincial as Kashmir, but it does. Oh, the Yule Cat story. That's right. The Yule Cat story, I guess. Well, the Yule Cat is not exactly a nice cat, I guess, but he is a cat, and he does do very well for himself. You know, eating children who don't get clothes. If I've got any Swedes in the stream, man, you guys have got some amazing folklore. Like I could write spooky stories all day about just Swedish folklore. I'm telling you. People be calling. All right. It's no secret either that 8 to 10 people disappear in the gardens every year. That's not to say they're killed. That's not to say they're abducted. What the park reports is that 8 to 10 people are reported missing to the park staff every year, and those reports are passed on to the police and later to the FBI. None of them are ever found, none of their remains ever surface to be identified, and none of them are ever heard from again. They simply come into the park, sometimes with their families or friends, or just by themselves, and they're never heard from again. The Stragview cat, that's right. Old One Ear. Old One Ear may be appearing in some other tales too, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. Let's see. The decorative ponds on the grounds have been dredged. The surrounding woods have been checked and rechecked. Dogs have been brought in to smell them out, but no evidence of foul play has ever been reported. The only two constants that can be reported in those disappearances. Let's see. There's only two constants ever reported in these disappearances. The victims are always male, and the disappearances are always between March 1st and September 15th. I only know these things because they're part of the new employee orientation. They tell the botanists, the visiting scientists, and the groundskeepers to be careful. They've had staff reported missing as well, though I somehow doubt that they get reported to police along with the others. They have to sign long release forms before they're hired that absolve the gardens of any wrongdoing should we disappear on the job. The owners are aware that strange things happen here, and they consider it a small price to pay for a botanical garden that seems to reside in an everlasting summer, even in the depths of winter. Oh, I based Old One Ear on a cat that I knew in the prison I used to work at. He ate real well, but he suffered from crippling feline diabetes. But he was a pip. I, however, am no researcher, no botanist, not even a groundskeeper. I'm a member of their security staff. I started on day shift, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and the old guy they had me working under turned out to be a glorified desk clerk. Randy was 45 and clearly liked the cushy job he had. He was the embodiment of a rent-a-cop, soft-bodied, eternally sitting, and he let me know how it was going to be right off the bat. I man the security booth, answering questions and filing reports. You maintain a secure presence around the park. Look sharp, kid. As you may or may not have heard, people have gone missing around here. Translation: you do all the walking, and I do all the easy stuff. I own a cat that was very much like Old One Ear, but no, Old One Ear was definitely modeled out of I can't remember what we used to call that cat, but he like I said, he ate real well. So for the next few months, I walked my boot soles off as I toured the park. There was an electric cart that security was supposed to ride around in, but the battery was bad, and they'd never gotten around to changing it. So I was left to patrol the grounds with my ring of keys, flashlight, and a radio that would get me a little more than a worthless acknowledgement. Every hour, we were supposed to make a check of the grounds, but during the day, it seemed to be constantly going from one problem to another. The garden played host to many people who came to see the beautiful displays and rare plants, but many others came simply to pass the time or get up to nonsense. Every day seemed to be another chance to break up necking teens, stop people from touching the flowers, throw out teens who came to cause trouble, or even to ask groups of tourists who were there to look into the mysterious disappearances to stop trampling the displays. Sorry, guys. Ears itchy. Oh, definitely better than the inmates. The inmates were usually the one that fed him, so he was eating chow hall food. Let's see. The first month was hell, even for $26 an hour. In that time, however, I did see the pale lady. I was yelling at some tourists, one of whom was ankle deep in the reflecting pool of lilies, when I looked up to see her. At first glance, I thought she was another tourist. I had just looked up to tell her to get back on the walking path when I noticed her alabaster skin and unmoving posture. I felt a strange tremor run through my body as I looked at her, and I hardly noticed my wet socks and dripping boots as I led the tourist towards the front gate. After that, I found re- I found reasons to have my rounds take me to that particular pool. The pale lady is a statue that was gifted to the garden by Dr. Thurston, the head of the gardens, about 10 years ago. It sits out amidst the north reflecting pool, surrounded by water lilies, and is truly a work of art. The statue depicts a woman in a long flowing robe, her hair unbound and hanging down her back. She covers her face with a fan, her eyes staring out cat-like and playful. The temperature around that pool is always summery, the water never so much as growing slush in the winter. The statue seems to be the epicenter of the good weather that surrounds the garden, and the management has made it the centerpiece. That's what I always heard, yeah. I asked Randy about the statue, and he just shrugged and turned the page on his magazine. Thing's creepy. I remember having to work nights when I first started, and that pond was my least favorite spot to walk. I always felt like it was watching me. I'm pretty sure that it wasn't there a few times. Carl can say what he likes, but there's something off about that statue. I asked him for more, but he looked up from his hot rod mag and asked me if I didn't have something better to do. When I showed up the following day to find a brand new officer learning the ropes from Randy, it appeared that I did. Carl says you're on night shift now. Didn't he tell you? Nope. What happened to the night guy? Who knows? Just abandoned his post. Mark was always kind of flaky. I nodded, but couldn't help feeling a little skeptical. Mark had been flaky, but he still had alimony to pay. No one walks away from a $26 an hour job where most of your shift is spent sitting on ass. He was working the night shift, sitting in the booth from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and his relief had come in the next morning to find him gone. The camera showed him leaving the booth at around 4 o'clock, going on his appointed rounds, and walking off towards the north reflecting pool at 4:10. After that, who could say? No trace had no trace had ever been found of him, and I guess they decided that I would be a good fit for the post. One phone call later confirmed that I took one phone call later to confirm, and I took myself back home to get ready for that night. I'd never worked the night shift at the gardens, as I mentioned, and I wasn't really sure what to expect. I knew it was a position I'd be filling by myself, and I was a little excited about it. From what Carl told me on the phone, it was mostly a lot of watching cameras, making sure I hit the hourly rounds. He said the boss liked to make sure that everything was locked up after the gates closed at sunset, and he sometimes watched cameras to make sure that the guards weren't shirking in their rounds. Well, I was just a security guard. Dorm officer, I guess is what they call it. I never made it past officer. I was a little too, I don't want to say nice, but I found some of the stuff they do to be a little bit needless. Some of it's a little too gung ho. I like to come in, make my bread, do my job, but I don't like to be an ass about it. It was fun though. I definitely got a lot of good material for my Stragview stuff from working in a prison. Met a lot of cool people. Let's see. So with that, I frittered away the rest of my day until it was time to go to work that evening. March 15th. There was a big binder on my desk when I got there, and Randy made sure that I got the keys before he left. Better you than me, kid. You couldn't pay me enough to stay in this creepy old place at night. He left in a hurry, and I was left with another hour of daylight before they made the announcement and closed the gates. First couple of hours weren't so bad. I walked the grounds, helping people like I usually did. I directed some people towards certain exhibits and made sure that the buildings were secured after the botany staff had left for the day. When the gates closed, I did another walk around and looked for stragglers and people who might be hiding. We do occasionally get troublemakers after hours who think it's funny to try to stay in the park and steal things. There was none of that tonight, though, and as I finished my rounds, I went back to my desk and watched the cameras. I set an alarm on my watch so I wouldn't miss my next round in an hour, and content myself with watching the grainy CCTV footage on the security cameras. Let's see. That was indeed the genesis of Stragview. Yeah. Most of my time was spent in confinement because I was good at talking to people. So if you're good at talking to people, you're basically the negotiator in that little arrangement you have there. I worked with a big guy who's still a good friend of mine, who was more the hammer. If I couldn't talk him down, he came in to to deliver justice. We had another guy that worked up in the booth who was good at paperwork. If you read Shower 5, those are basically the two guys I worked with. They're still alive. They're still good friends of mine. If they're watching, what's up, guys? One of them I know follows me on the channel. There he is. What's up, Matt? We're just reading the Kashmir Botanical Gardens. At least one of them. He was the Thor. Let's see here. They had cameras just about all over the park. You could see most entrances and exits from the exhibits, and some of them had cameras over a few key exhibits, like the rare flowers or the endangered species room. One of these cameras faced the pond for the pale lady, and I found myself coming back to that one again and again. The longer I looked at it, the more it seemed to move sometimes when I took my eyes off of it. I know what that sounds like, but it's true. Sometimes you stare at something for so long that it seems to move, and the statue was no different. It would wiggle its arms, move its fan, even seem to sway a little, but it was all things I could chalk up to grainy camera footage. I would go check on it during my rounds too, but it always sat in the same place it had been. I've tried not to look at it so much, since I could feel myself lingering on it more. There was something about it that just pulled me towards it, and I worried that one night I might just walk out into the reflecting pond and sink in the mud. Can't really say the weirdness started on the first night, but by the third night, I knew something was weird around the gardens. Oh, it was. It's a pretty cool series. It would. I often tell people it would make a good show. I keep trying to find someone to pitch it to. True, true. Um, Books are always better. I mean, they just are, because the movie appears in your head. Hollywood tries, but You know, they can't quite make it sometimes. Got the fan on. It is warm in here. March 26th. It was just the little things. It was just a little thing. Nothing really worth reporting, but definitely worth writing here. Between 1 a.m. and 1:15 a.m., the Pale Lady statue disappeared. I was listening to the radio and watching the monitors, and I just tipped a cup of coffee to my lips when I scrolled past that particular monitor. I had got it from the vending machine by the office, and it tasted like mud water. Sometimes it does. The details are always in the pages. You are correct. Let's see here. Still, it was better than nothing, and if I was going to stay on these late nights, I had to have something to keep me up. I was cycling through the cameras, here a rare plant, there a pool of lilies, and when it came to the statue, I had to scroll back to make sure what I was seeing. I scrolled forward and back a couple of times to make sure it wasn't a bug or some kind of electrical failure, but after 5 minutes, I couldn't find any reason for the error. Statue was gone. I wasn't too worried at first. I mean, it was a statue. Where was it going to go? I kind of thought that it might be some sort of electrical problem after all, but I couldn't figure out why it would disappear, just the statue. So I grabbed my Maglite and brought my coffee with me and went out to do a check. I was due for one in about 10 minutes anyway, so I supposed I would just start a little early. The Pale Lady's lily pond is towards the middle part of my round. So I made my way around the rest of the exhibits as I came towards that particular spot. It was about 1:12 when I got to her pond, and I expected that I would shine my flashlight into the willow trees out there and find her still on her pedestal. Seeing the area, I checked around the pond and her pedestal, but the camera hadn't lied. The statue was gone. I immediately started looking for clues. The statue was not cheap, at least I figured it wasn't, and if it came up missing and I couldn't find it, I was likely to be fired. I checked for footprints, since someone had clearly gone into the pond to get it, and for signs of entry over the wall, since they couldn't have gotten in any other way. I had just completed my search, finding nothing, when I heard a weird grating noise. If you ever played with sidewalk chalk as a kid, that was about all I can equal it to. It sounded like someone pushing chalk over concrete, except the volume on it was about 100 times what I was used to. I turned around, trying to see what had made the noise, and I kind of figured it might be someone trying to be quiet as they moved the statue. I expected to see a couple of guys hiding somewhere nearby, the statue between them, and I pulled out my phone so I could call the cops if that was what it was. Instead, I found the statue of the Pale Lady back on its pedestal, as if it had never gone anywhere. I held it in the beam of my flashlight for a few minutes, trying to see what the hell was going on. There was no way I had missed it. I had checked the whole damn area for the statue, but here it was. I made another pass around the pond, looking for clues or anything that might tell me where it had went. After 30 minutes, I realized I wasn't going to find anything and made my way back to the booth. I had pulled out a report to write it up, but by the time my alarm went off for the next round, I realized I hadn't written anything. Aw, sorry, Olivia. We'll see you next time. I'm sure we'll do another one of these. We'll have to read some more stories again. Let's see. What was there to write? Was I going to tell Carl that I had thought the statue was gone, only to find out that it was there the whole time? Sounded like a lunatic. Best case scenario, they would laugh at me and call it nighttime jitters. So I decided not to report it. The rest of my night went by pretty quietly. March 27th. When I came in for my next shift after a day off, Randy seemed genuinely happy to see me for the first time ever. Wasn't sure you'd be back or not. Some of the new guys leave after the first night and just never come back. Kind of glad you didn't run off. You seem more stable than the rest of them, he added. After that business a couple of nights ago, I kept a careful watch over the statue. I kept a little record too, which is what you're probably reading here. Just something for my own peace of mind so I could prove I wasn't losing it. That night, I saw the statue disappear from its spot in the lily pond twice. I witnessed it return every time on camera, and it was always gone for 10 to 20 minutes at a time. I thought about going to check on it, but decided against it. I hadn't liked being out there when it had gone. It felt like something was creeping around there with me, and the thought of statues moving on their own wouldn't leave my mind. March 28th. It happened 2 more times tonight. While on my round, I discovered it gone both times, though I never stuck around to see if it had come back. If I were watching on the camera, there would be a puff of static followed by a sudden reappearance of the statue. And after the first time, I never questioned. It was a strange little mystery, but nothing else. I think this is going to be the last one, guys. I'm starting to lose my voice, but like I said, we'll definitely do more of these. March 30th. It all came to a head tonight. Tonight, I met someone on my rounds, and I have to believe that it was the pale lady. She had lured me into a false sense of security by staying put Saturday night. I usually noticed her gone between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., so when Saturday came and went with her still in her lily pond, I began to doubt the experience of the past week. It was my first week on night shift. Maybe I was seeing things, jumping at shadows. I went home and slept, waking up fresher than I had in a few days, and spent most of the night without so much as a hiccup. The park closes early on Sunday, so by the time I got there, it was already locked up, and all I had to do was my usual rounds and watch the cameras. Oh no, I've still got a whole pot of tea. Randy stuck around to talk for almost an hour, telling me how the new kid had needed to leave early for an appointment or something. He was a little miffed because he had to do rounds for the last 3 hours by himself, and he didn't feel that someone with his kind of time in should have to do that kind of thing. I listened, pretending to be sympathetic, while I felt that it was his comeuppance for being a lazy ass. What kind of appointment would you have on a Sunday anyway? I tell you, kids today are so lazy and unreliable. It was just starting to get dark when he left for the day, and after that, it was just me and the quiet, empty garden. The next 6 hours seemed to drag by. I sat in the security booth and listened to the radio mostly. I did some camera watching, went and ran some birds out of one of the exhibits, and really just had fun sitting on my butt. Around midnight, I checked the cameras and found everything where it was supposed to be, pale lady included. I grabbed my flashlight and my keys and went out to do my midnight round, expecting nothing more strenuous than some leftover trash to pick up on my way. I was just coming around the edge of the exhibit when I saw someone further up the path. I guess saw isn't the right word. I heard her before I saw her. It sounded like someone was dragging a rock across the concrete, and it reminded me of the sound I'd heard that night when I thought the statue was missing. As I came closer to the pond, I saw a woman walking slowly up the path. It looked like a woman, at least. Watching her walk, I thought maybe it was an older lady who was walking a little too stiffly. Her gait was slow, and it looked like it hurt her to put one foot in front of the other. I called out and asked her how she had gotten in here. To tell you the truth, it scared the hell out of me. I hadn't seen another living person since Randy left for the day, and the sudden appearance of someone new put my hair up. She kept walking like she hadn't heard me, and I quickened my pace so I could get in front of her and confront her. It wasn't hard. She wasn't exactly running, but as I came around, I realized she was holding a fan in front of her face, blocking it from sight. She was dressed in old clothes like a Renaissance fair dress, and her hair was hanging loose around her shoulders. Sometimes the gardens hire people in costume to walk around, but I hadn't gotten a memo about any upcoming events. They certainly wouldn't be here in the middle of the night either, and I felt pretty confident that she wasn't supposed to be here. Heard about yours too. Right, that's where I heard about it. My grandma used to say it. Either that or like chills up your spine means that a goose walked across your grave or something. I stood in her path, and she tried to go around me. It seemed that she noticed me as I shouted at her the second time. "Excuse me, ma'am. The park's closed for the night. What are you doing here?" For a moment, all we did was stare at each other. I seemed to have startled her as badly as she had startled me, but she recovered a little quicker than I did. She took a step towards me, extending her hand as if she meant to touch my face, and I took a step out of her reach. I was a head taller than she was, but I still didn't want some strange old lady touching my face in the middle of an empty garden in the middle of the night. I thought about raising my flashlight, but suddenly my arm was heavy. It was as if a great weight had set on my wrist, and when she reached out to stroke my cheek this time, there was nothing I could do about it. "Such a handsome guardsman," she commented, and her voice was odd. She sounded both 1,000 years old and painfully young. She sounded like she had lived for decades in a single day. I can't really explain it to you, but she was so strange that I could do little but look into her eyes as they swam around the rim of the fan. "Would you like to walk with me?" she asked. And I got the feeling that it wasn't a question. I got the feeling people did not deny this particular lady and just walk away. I opened my mouth to tell her that would be lovely, but some primitive instinct slammed the brakes on my mouth. Strange voice argued that if I walked with her, I would never go walking anywhere again. The lady would lead me to a place both terrible and beautiful, but there would be there would be not be a place that I could walk back from. Let's see. Oh, I grew up in Florida, so I guess that's about as south as it gets. I don't know. I mean, unless you count Texas, I guess Texas is technically more south than we are. But let's see. When I shook my head, it seemed to surprise her. "Sorry, ma'am, I'm on duty. Perhaps another time?" She looked sad, but nodded from behind her colorful fan. She walked around me, continuing her stroll as I stood there like a statue. I didn't want to follow her. Suddenly wanted nothing so much as to not be here when Randy showed up in the morning. Let's see. I wonder if this was what the other guards had seen. I wondered how many of them had gone. I wonder how many of them had gone with her. How many of them had simply left after she continued on her walk. One in particular I heard about from Southern stuff was the Wampus Cat. My mom used to like to scare me with the Wampus Cat when I was like, really little. He's made an appearance in some of my stories. I think he probably will again. He's a Southern classic. Soap Sally is one I heard about recently too. I've done a couple of her in here too. She's supposed to be kind of a Southern favorite as well. I turned around to continue my round or just run till my legs fell off, and that's when something happened that I can't explain. I have a vague memory of her standing right behind me. Her fan closed. Her fan closed and her fan closed and her face now on display. But I could no more tell you what her face looked like than I could tell you the population of Madrid. If something happened, I don't have any memory of it. Everything suddenly and irreparably went dark. And the next thing I knew, there were people standing over me. Mm-hmm. Like, the Wampus Cat was the biggest one. Like, like I said, mom used to like to scare me with the Wampus Cat and make cat noises. Carl was there, and Randy, and a few other park staff that appeared to have come in early for Monday. Someone was shining a light in my eyes, and it made me squint as I came back to myself. Park had an EMT on standby, but it appeared that it was too early for him. This guy looked like an outside paramedic, and as I came around, he turned the light off and nodded. How are you feeling, sir? Very confused, I told him as I sat up. The last thing I remember is that it was nighttime and I was on a round. I didn't remember the lady that I'd seen walking around until later that day. At that point, everything was still a blur. He doesn't look concussed, the EMT said, turning to someone I hadn't seen since my interview. I gulped. That was Dr. Thurston, the head of the Kashmir Botanical Gardens. Dr. Thurston was intimidating in that way that all men of a comfortable age are. He wasn't particularly large, no bigger than I was, and he didn't look angry as he stood smiling placidly at me. But I knew that if he suspected I was on drugs or had decided to have a little nap on the sidewalk, that I would be fired without question. Dr. Thurston smiled at me, his face that of a Pa Cartwright in my mind, and he kneeled a little as he got on eye level with me. If I drug test you, son, are you going to be on the dope? I shook my head emphatically. I'm sorry, guys. On the dope is such a. I know I wrote it, but like I love that phrase "on the dope." Like it's just such an older person thing to say. I love it. I shook my head emphatically. No, sir, I had never touched the stuff. He nodded. I believe you. You ever fainted like that before? No, sir. When do you work next? Tonight, sir. Tonight and Tuesday too. Or take tonight and Tuesday too. I'll tell Chuck that he's got an extra day this week. Get yourself checked out and get some rest. Come back fresh on Wednesday. He patted my arm and I thanked him for his generosity. I wrote this down as I started to come back, but I'm not sure how much of it is real and how much of it is the stuff my mind created. I'll continue to keep this journal just in case other weirdness happens. I can't afford to quit my job at the gardens, but there's definitely something strange going on. The pale lady seems to be at the heart of it. I know I saw her walking around, but when I asked Randy about what they found on the footage, he said it's all staticky after midnight. The next thing on the camera is me, collapsed on the ground at about 1:15. Something odd's definitely going on here, and I mean to get to the bottom of it. I know, right? I laughed while I wrote it. Like it's something that my grandpa would have said. Are you on the dope, boy? Just something that old people say sometimes. Well, guys, I think that is gonna do it for me. I'm losing my voice, but like I said, we'll definitely do some more of these. If you'd like a book, like I said, there's a link in any of my videos. I'd love to. I'd love to sell you one. You can find me out in the wild. Heck, I'll even sign it for you. I'd love to start doing conventions and things. But I think I'm going to sign off for the night. Thanks for showing up, guys. I loved reading to you. Oh yeah, Matt, the part with the trees is cool. That's one of my favorites. Um, anyway, guys, I'll catch you on the next one. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.